Hi, everybody. It's the Laughing Place Movie Club episode 3. This is a Star Wars episode. That's why I'm hosting, because I'm the Star Wars guy here at Laughing Place. We're going to talk about Solo, a Star Wars story. It's a recent edition on Disney Plus, and we've got 3 people besides myself. I'm Mike Celestino. I'm going to be hosting. We've also got Rebecca Mosley up there in the this way in the corner.
Yep, that's me.
What are you, Jeremiah? You're the East South Central Florida correspondent now?
South Central Florida, that's it.
South Central. Jeremiah Good up here above me. Hi, Jeremiah. And then to my right slash left, we've got Kyle Burbank.
Hello.
And we're talking about Solo, a Star Wars story. It's famously the least well-received and least money-making film in all of history or something. But I mostly like this movie. I have some problems with it, but we'll talk about our little nitpicks. What do you guys think overall? Let's start with Rebecca and go around.
Well, I skipped it when it was in theaters, so I didn't see it until it came to home release. And mostly I skipped it in theaters because nobody I knew seemed to really enjoy it. So I felt, I don't need to jump into it. And it surprised me by how much I did actually enjoy it. So I don't know if it was because my expectations had been way down or not, but I did enjoy this take on Han Solo. So.
Jeremiah?
I enjoyed it. I think I'm the exact opposite of you, Mike, how you are the diehard Star Wars. Like, if it's not great, if it doesn't fit the puzzle pieces, you're not the biggest fan of it. I still love going to the movies and seeing a Star Wars movie, even if it is not the best. But it was fun. I think if it would have come out a year later, it would have been more well received. But I enjoyed it.
And Kyle?
I also like that. I was actually just looking at my review of the movie that I wrote. I actually saw this movie with Jeremiah for the first time because we went to the screening for the junket, and I gave it a 4, which might be a little generous, but I remember enjoying it at the time, and I really, in my review, hyped the big surprise in it. I think that was what kind of blew me away and pushed it up there, but definitely some eye roll moments as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I stand with it too. I think what I really like about it is that it's kind of a lower stakes Star Wars movie. It doesn't really have the fate of the galaxy at stake. You're really just spending time with these characters, some of which we've known before. So we're getting to know like younger versions of some of these characters. But, it's not like Jedi versus Sith. It's not, the Empire taking control of the galaxy, that kind of thing. We're just zooming in on one little corner of the galaxy, which I always really like to see. And it reminds me of the kind of story we would get in the old expanded universe for Star Wars, which is what I really like, but this time up on the big screen. So I kind of want to go through the movie and talk about a bunch of little specifics from the film, both character-wise and story-wise, and see what we all think of it. My first thought when the movie begins is I find that first line of the title crawl kind of misleading because it says it's a lawless time, which seems odd to me because we're like 10 years into the Empire having taken control of the galaxy. So to me, that's kind of odd because I feel like it should be the opposite of that. We should have more control. The Empire is like trying to exert more control over the galaxy. The lawless time is after the Empire is destroyed to me. So that I find that a little bit confusing. But then we get to spend some time on Corellia, which is Han Solo's home planet. And we meet the little the gang that he works for. Nerd alert.
But Mike, can I jump in real quick regarding the lawless time question, point of order? Is it a reference to the syndicates? Because I could never really get into that world of Star Wars. So it's something I just took and listened to in the moment. Does that?
Yeah, maybe. And that's something that they got into a lot in Clone Wars, which I just watched all of recently. There's like 5 different families of crime organizations that are, I guess, as the Empire exerts more control over the galaxy, these guys are all kind of tightening their grip on their little corner of the galaxy. And I guess in in that way. The Empire is kind of trying to weed out all of this lawlessness in the universe, in the galaxy. So I guess that makes sense. But I really like this almost kind of Dickensian world that we see Han and Kira living in the beginning of the movie, especially like Mother Proxima, that little like worm character who's in charge. Does anybody have any thoughts about that part of the story at the beginning?
I have a nerd alert of sorts. When I was young, you know how you make imaginary worlds when you're young, like you get into a fight with some family or whatever, so you create this story of how you're an orphan or maybe you guys did it, but I did that kind of thing. And one of the stories that I had in my mind was that I was somehow Han Solo's lost sister. Like we got separated when we were both incredibly young, and he didn't know I was around. But I had very vague memories of him, and I had this whole envisioned world of what our home planet of Corellia would have been like. Somehow I ended up somewhere else, and he ended up staying there, and it fit what I had envisioned. So I was happy.
That's awesome. So yeah, we kind of always knew from the expanded universe that Han was from Corellia, but this movie was written by Jonathan Kasdan, who is the son. Well, Jonathan Kasdan and Lawrence Kasdan. So Lawrence Kasdan wrote Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, or co-wrote them, and then now his son teamed up with him to write this movie Solo. And Jonathan Kasdan, I got to interview him when Solo came out, both Lawrence and Jonathan. And Jonathan seems like a huge Star Wars nerd, kind of like me, and he was trying to work in all these references that he knew from the expanded universe. Because Corellia had never really been mentioned before in the movies or anything. This was just kind of like a backstory kind of thing. You also got like Sabacc, which you hear for the first time mentioned in Lady Proxima's den or whatever. And then the dice is a big part of the background of Star Wars. You see the dice hanging from the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon in the original Star Wars film. So they really delved into that a lot more in the Disney era. Now that they show up in The Last Jedi, and they were in a deleted scene from The Force Awakens, and then we get the backstory of the dice here as well. The first big groaner moment to me comes when we find out how Han got his last name.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys feel the same way. Does anybody want to talk about that?
I will. That was one of those ones where, we all expected something to come fun of it, but that was just such a bad drop. It's like, Solo. Yeah. Why did we need that?
And along the same lines, kind of later on in the film, there's a line where Han's talking to Chewbacca and he finds out Chewbacca's name, and he's like, Chewbacca, that's too long. We're gonna have to give you a nickname. That's the kind of thing, those retrospective jokes that don't really land for me. I think you could lose them pretty easily and have the movie work a little bit better.
Yeah, it reminds me of season 4 of Community, where it's kind of takes on sort of that tone, but they're like, oh, this self-referential stuff is what's really going to hit. People are going to love this. And you're like, no, that's just it. You can tell that it's from someone else.
Yeah, they just kind of retrocon everything in. Like, hey, we need a reason. I mean, yes, the entire movie is a retcon, but that the drops like that are really not needed. It's like we didn't need to know about midichlorians, but they have to find a reason to explain it to us no matter what.
So Doobie's asking if any of the backstories surprised us. I think we kind of always knew that Han grew up on the streets, so that didn't really surprise me. The Lando stuff, we knew he was a kind of a gambler and a smooth talker, criminal guy, and then it's always been ingrained in Star Wars mythology that somehow Han had rescued Chewbacca from Imperial, being a slave to the Empire, and that's how they got together. And then he owed him the life debt, which they don't really bring up the life debt in this movie, do they? No,
I don't think they say anything about it. They save that for the Christmas special.
So we get to Mimban, which is the second planet that we spend any time on, and this is where Han is in the Imperial army. He's kind of fighting on the ground. He wants to be a pilot. He's trying to learn how to train to be a pilot. There's a deleted scene where he's learning how to pilot a TIE fighter, and then he does some crazy trick, and they're not happy with how he doesn't follow the rules, and they send him to Mimban to fight on the ground. This is where we meet Chewbacca. We also meet Tobias Beckett, played by Woody Harrelson, and his crew, which are Rio Durant, played by the Mandalorian creator Jon Favreau, and Val, played by Tandy Newton of Westworld and a bunch of other stuff. What do you guys think of these characters?
I think that they should have stuck around a little bit more. I enjoyed, well, I can't say I enjoyed Tobias's bit. Like, I liked them as a group. I think if they would have kept the group together more than, 1.5 scenes, it probably could have run a little bit better and it could have gone almost the entire film before they started losing the members.
Right. Yeah, they do get killed off pretty much right away, right in that big heist sequence on the planet Vandor, which is where they're trying to steal the coaxium from that Imperial train. So obviously they're kind of steering the story in like a Western direction, leading into that Western influence. That wasn't me.
That's where that's where I kind of get taken out of the film for a bit, because the genre of film that I am least fond of is the train robbery. The Wild West train robbery. So for me, that sequence, I don't know why, but it, like, whenever a movie has something on a train, I tend to tune out.
Okay.
Even Last Crusade.
Yeah, Last Crusade did it. Didn't one of the Avengers movies have some long sequence where they had to do stuff on a train? I feel
First
like
Avenger.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, when you start to do that type of thing where you're on a train and you're having to fight each other, and some people are on top of a train and then trying to be, I zone out.
That's funny. That's interesting, because I mean, the train robbery as a genre goes back to like the very beginning of filmmaking.
Oh no, it's bad. One of my dad's favorite films is Disney's Great Train Robbery. So
right.
it's not a good thing.
And yeah, it probably wasn't really a thing that we had seen before, at least on screen in Star Wars. So you could see why they would want to explore that, especially considering the Western roots that Star Wars has. There's Rio, voiced by Jon Favreau.
What was it? Just me, or did the cars look like enormous sized mouse droids?
Yeah, very similar design.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a trapezoid shape. And that ended up being one of my favorite Lego sets, actually, to come out of Solo, was the train. You could buy a bunch of them and connect them together, but they were kind of expensive, so I just got one. But Silver Streak, Jimmy says...
yeah, you don't like that one also, Rebecca?
I haven't even bothered to see it. That's how out of trains I am. So sorry.
And then we get introduced to kind of the fake out villain of this movie, which is Enfys Nest. And she's the head of a gang called the Cloud Riders. And they're presented as kind of marauders, but we find out, like, there's a twist near the end where we find out that they're not quite what they seem. How do you guys feel about Enfys Nest?
Kind of forgot about it until you mentioned it.
Yeah, she really is kind of forgettable. I like the story later on. You know, she pretty much introduces the things are built on hope line that has now kind of really been driven home. But her intro in the train robbery is very forgettable. Like, that entire sequence. I love the train robbery part. Sorry, Rebecca, but her part was not the greatest.
Yeah, and then not to skip ahead, but we find out that
I'm getting roasted for my trains. I love trains. I just don't like train robbery sequence in film for whatever reason. I love trains. Okay, just let me put that out there. I love trains.
It's fine. You don't have to like train robbery.
I love trains.
So we find out near the end that when Han helps out Enfys Nest, he's kind of planting the seeds for the rebellion to be built against the Empire. And then he turns away and he goes off on his own adventures. Obviously, we know later on he comes back and joins the rebellion. And this kind of brings me to my other major complaint about the film, is that I I don't think it has a very interesting main villain. Obviously, the main villain turns out to be Dryden Voss, who's played by Paul Bettany, an actor I really like. He's great in the MCU as Vision slash what's the
Jarvis.
Jarvis, yeah. But Dryden Voss, I feel like he's kind of a dull villain to me. And I remember this is probably the fourth or fifth time that I watched it this weekend, but the first 2 or 3 times I like couldn't remember that character's name, which is always a sign for me that I didn't find him interesting, because I'm really good at remembering names of Star Wars characters. But Dryden is in charge of a subsection of a crime syndicate called the Crimson Dawn, which we find out later is run by Darth Maul, obviously. And yeah, and so I heard that the reason they called it Crimson Dawn was kind of like a hint to tell you that later on we're going to find out that it was Darth Maul in charge of that. Let's talk about Kira as a character. This is Emilia Clarke from Game of Thrones playing Han Solo's kind of love interest growing up, and then they like reunite a little bit later on. I think like 4 or 5 years later in the span of this movie, when they go on this big heist together. What do you guys think of Kira? Anybody?
I mean, I kind of like the dynamic of her, how they kind of have this history, but she's not necessarily loyal to him or to either side. So I thought that worked well. But as far as their love story, I thought it was okay.
I found her interesting as kind of a not counterbalance, but like contrast to Leia, because here you have Leia's story is adopted, raised in a home with lots of structure and responsibility and culture, and just a very, very different type of path. Than you have Kira, who also orphaned but abandoned to this life, or maybe taken for this life. I don't know specifically, but clearly parental structure was not in her upbringing. She's had to make it on her own. She's had to fight her way, and so you just have this kind of totally different paths for the two women who play the romantic role in Han's life.
So do you guys think we'll ever find out what happened to Kira after this movie?
You mean when Dose comes out?
Right. Hashtag make Solo 2 happen. But so this is kind of one of the big cliffhangers that exists right now in the current Star Wars canon, because obviously they set up the ending of this film to lead into other Star Wars story and movies, and then this movie kind of tanked. Those movies got canceled. We've got more Disney Plus live action series coming up. I could see Kira kind of fitting in possibly to the Obi-Wan series if they decide to do that. What do you guys think?
Well, how would you write her story? Is this a total villain turn, or is this making her own way based on her life? How do you feel it, Mike?
I think it's a half and half between those two. And, Obi-Wan's story intertwines with Darth Maul's so much that, I mean, if we watch Rebels, we know where that story ends, but there's nothing that says that Obi-Wan and Darth Maul can't interact in the interim between those two time periods. So I can see Kira being a part of that story in that way. Nick Morgan asked, who is Paul Bettany married to? There is a Disney and MCU connection.
Isn't Paul Bettany just the Disney and MCU connection?
No, I forget her name, but she voices Spider-Man's suit.
Oh, she's Friday?
Yeah.
Very cool.
So that would be a MCU Solo Sony connection.
Really?
Oh, so there's a Rocketeer connection.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And Labyrinth connection.
Oh, Labyrinth. That's another one.
So let's talk about kind of the alternate history of this movie, where Phil Lord and Chris Miller were originally hired to direct this film. They started shooting it, and then I want to say like 3 weeks into production, they got shut down and replaced by Ron Howard, who's been a filmmaker for a very long time, many decades in the industry. Obviously started out as an actor, but what do you guys think the difference would be had they followed through and let Phil Lord and Chris Miller finish this movie?
Did you say 3 weeks into production or 3 weeks until the end of production? 'Cause
I
was
said
near the end.
Was it near the end? I could be wrong about that. I thought it was
I
like
thought they were like almost done, like a few weeks to go, and then they brought him in. That's why it was even kind of crazier. But no, I think the consensus is that it probably would have been a bit funnier and I can't think of the word I want to use, but more of their sense of humor, I think is what people always gravitate towards. And maybe they were going to just be a little too fast and loose with it, and they wanted to really stick to canon more carefully, which is kind of funny because him getting a stupid last name somehow flies, but who knows what kind of off-color joke they might have made otherwise.
Yeah, so I heard that the reason they got let go is that Lawrence Kasdan wasn't happy with the amount of improvisation they were encouraging on set. You know, obviously he had come from a much stricter filmmaking background, and these guys really play like fast and loose with how much time they're taking, I guess, for each take and shot, and they were just wasting too much time, according to rumor. But then when I saw the film finally, I feel like I was able to accurately pick out which parts they had shot, not knowing which scenes they had contributed to. And then later on, Jonathan Kasdan on Twitter pretty much confirmed things I suspected, like the part where Han speaks Wookiee or Shriwook to Chewbacca. That was a Phil Lord and Chris Miller addition. And I knew that in the theater. I was like, okay, that's their addition to the film, or one of them. So you can kind of pick out the moments that fit their sense of humor.
Anything that's kind of silly that is more for the, hey, let's get a laugh in here, definitely came across. You know, I was thinking when Enfys Nest is talking to Han, giving that deep speech, I don't feel that was part of their cut. That feels much more like a Ron Howard segment.
It could very well be. I don't know about that one. Another thing that got changed is Michael K. Williams from The Wire was originally going to play Dryden Voss. So I don't know if that would have improved my feelings on that character, if that would have been more interesting, because I'm a big fan of Omar, the character from The Wire. So maybe he would have brought something more to that role.
Yeah, I find that role, I agree with you on that role. I find that role very, I don't know, confusing. I don't truly understand what is his goal? Why is he interested in what he's, it's a very, I don't know, almost, what's the word? Like dual, very, I don't know. I can't quite nail down why and usually for me, a villain tends to be best when they're kind of almost one-dimensional. I mean, not that as far as their focus, the reality of the character, I like it to be multifaceted, but at least I have like kind of an idea of why this person is on this particular path.
Yeah, he almost seems kind of like evil for the sake of being evil.
I can't really figure out exactly what his benefit is within the structure, like you're talking about, within the structure of the empire and the reality of kind of the social political situation and all that. I can't exactly put my finger on what's motivating him.
Jason Tation says Chewbacca, even for a Wookiee, he's actually smarter than he looks. I guess that's true.
I did enjoy Chewie in this film. And the deleted scene with the snowball fight, that's adorable. I watched that today because it was cute and I liked it. So.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. And I wanted to bring up before we get to Doobie's comment here, in the scene where Han and Chewie first meet in that fight that they have in that mud pit, somebody pointed out on Twitter that the subtitles are missing on Disney Plus. If you watch it, if you watch the film with the subtitles off, which most people do, there's supposed to be subtitles in those moments where Han is speaking Wookiee to Chewbacca, but they're just not there. They don't come up. So you'd have to like turn on the caption and get
that's funny.
in Shriwook. Hopefully they'll correct that eventually. But Doobie asks, what are your thoughts on L337? You like what they did there? I thought that was a really funny character. I enjoy L3. I think Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I don't know much of her other stuff. I haven't watched Fleabag or anything, but I think she's really funny as a performer. And I think this character added a lot of color to the movie. And she's kind of another one of those characters that's eliminated pretty quickly. So we don't get to spend a lot of time with her. But her relationship with Lando is pretty funny and interesting to me. What did you guys think?
I liked her too. Apparently Nick Morgan doesn't.
Yeah.
Was
I lost everybody but myself.
oh, did you? Oh,
I think you froze.
I think we've lost Mike.
I'm taking over this thing now.
Hey,
my thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
My thought on L3 was she was probably one of the deepest characters in this film. I mean, because we didn't know anything about her, it gave us more of a background. And I mean, she actually also is the first character to mention anything about what we all know now as Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, because she says something about the Black Spires. And I can remember seeing it. I think it was Kyle and I went and saw it. And then the second time I saw it, I remember sitting there and all of a sudden hearing that and running out of the theater to tweet what I just heard. And I think that was like opening day. I think
Nerd alert. Nerd alert.
That's right. I had that on my list to bring up later. But yeah, we do get a Black Spire reference in here. Obviously, they're always seeding in all the other parts of the Star Wars canon to reference. There's also a bunch of Easter eggs in the yacht and, Dryden Voss there. I couldn't remember his name again. In Dryden Voss's yacht, there's you have the Idol of Fertility from Raiders of the Lost Ark, just pretty visible there. There's a thing that people always think is the Crystal Skull from the Indiana Jones film, but it's actually from the cover of one of the young Han Solo books. I think it's Han Solo at Star's End, has a crystal skull looking thing that they took and put it in Dryden's yacht. And then there's like a suit of Mandalorian armor and a bunch of little Easter eggs like that. I really appreciate it. My favorite location in the film, and this brings me to one of my other complaints, but my favorite location is called the Fort Ipso Lodge, which is where we meet Lando for the first time. It's also where we see Clint Howard, Ron Howard's brother, who's in most of his films. But one of my complaints that has to do with this scene is that the cinematography is very dark throughout this entire movie. This is something that was a point of contention when the movie came out, because a lot of movie theaters don't turn up the brightness on their projectors enough, and this movie was kind of a victim of that because you couldn't see a lot of the detail in the sets. And even watching it at home, I kind of wish we could see more of locations like the Fort Ipso Lodge, because so much effort was put into the production design there. But I really like the look of that location particularly.
And Mike, it was the 1980 Han Solo and the Lost Legacy book.
There we go. See, I don't know everything.
Oh, hey, Mike, I have a question for you because you're the Star Wars knowledgeable dude. The L337, did they choose those numbers because of the reference to it's leaked, right? Elite speak or whatever, the notion of on the internet of, what's it?
I think I would guess.
Right?
I do know what you're talking about, and I would guess that is the case, but you'd have to ask Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who named the character, and they've done zero press for the movie because they weren't, they were kicked off of it, basically.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that will ever be answered.
Because I found that character's arc weird, but you weren't here, so I couldn't ask you about it because you had disappeared for a short bit, and then we moved on. But I'm going to ask you now.
Also disappeared.
Because her story, she's like self-built, right? And so there's kind of this almost semi self-aware notion with L337, and then there's this moment where she frees all the droids and she's like, go be free and all that. But then doesn't her role in the film end with her kind of being entrapped and encased in the Falcon? Don't they just kind of steal her brain and shove it in the Falcon?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I actually thought, I was convinced that they were going to follow up on that in episode 9 because we knew Lando is coming back and we knew Lando was going to be reunited with the Falcon. And I thought for sure there was going to be a moment where Lando gets in the cockpit of the Falcon and like taps the navigation system or whatever. And he's like, you know, good to see you, baby, or whatever. Like,
Is that a euphemism?
not that kind of tap. Nick says, how old is Han in this movie in relation to A New Hope? So Han, I think, is supposed to be 10 years younger than in A New Hope, so which puts him in his early to mid 20s. Because he's around, I think Harrison Ford was around like 34 when they shot the first Star Wars movie. So this movie, Solo, takes place about halfway between episodes 3 and 4 of the Star Wars saga. Jason gave us 11 thumbs up. So that's nice.
Thank you, Jason.
So that brings us to the sequence that I think makes this entire movie worth it. And that's the whole section from Kessel, Spice Mines of Kessel, to the Maelstrom. I just think that if you just watch that part of the movie, you would think, oh, this movie must be amazing, because I think everything that happens in those sequences is fantastic and really funny, and the action's really great. There's some amazing moments where, you know, one of my favorite things that happens in the movie is when they're flying the Falcon and it just kind of like flips around and slams that TIE fighter into an asteroid.
Mhm.
I just thought that was so cool. And then there's the giant like creature that lives in that maw. I think it's called the Summa Verminoth or whatever. It's like a
It's enormous.
it's a reference to yeah. It's like a H.P. Lovecraft kind of thing, I think. But I really love the design of that creature and the idea that there are these like enormous monsters living out there. Did I go dark?
You did, but you came back.
I don't know.
You did.
Okay.
Just
And
it
the
was
sun's
just a
going.
momentary, and you came back.
So did you guys? Have
It was
any
while
thoughts
you were
about
talking.
that?
It was while you were talking about the spiral. So it was almost as if we were in the cockpit experiencing heavy G's, like you know how you get that tunnel and then you come back out.
No, I
there's
agree,
also
Mike.
go ahead.
I agree that is definitely the highlight of the film, and it really does make you feel like it's a Star Wars movie with the space battle type feel.
There's a moment in that where Kira rests her hand on Han's shoulder, and for some reason it felt like it threw me to a moment. It felt like I should remember that from a moment in the original between Leia and Han, but yet I couldn't find like a still online. I tried just Googling, but it was weird to me how it made me think of those moments with Han and Leia in a cockpit. So I'm gonna have to find it. It's gonna send me down a rabbit hole of seeing if I'm right that is an homage to a moment from the original.
I want to say it's right after they have attached themselves to the back of the Star Destroyer when they float with the garbage, and she says like,
And that's when she leans down
Sorry.
and kisses him on the cheek.
yeah, exactly. So,
Okay, so
yeah,
I'm
I
not
think you're right
correct.
about that.
Okay.
There's also a reference to Back to the Future Part 2 in this movie, when Han's talking about his friend Needles, the street racer, which is confirmed by Jonathan Kasdan. So I wasn't crazy when I thought that.
But
I
who plays
appreciated that.
Needles?
Who plays Needles? I don't remember.
Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
No, Flea. Wait, no. Flea is one of Biff's gang members. I think his name is 3D.
No, Flea is
Except-
Needles because in Back to the Future 3 or Back to the Future 2, when they're in the future and the screen pops up, that's Needles.
Maybe you're right. Okay,
Hey, you know
See, I
Star
don't know
Wars. I know Back to the Future.
fair enough. Okay, I'll have to look it up, but I believe you.
Google
So-
says it's Flea.
Needles is Flea. All right,
Yeah,
good
Red
enough.
Hot Chili Peppers musician, better known as Flea, played Needles.
Of Rock
Okay.
and Space Mountain fame.
Very good. Thank you, Kyle.
And Rockin' California Screamin'.
I'll defer
Yeah.
to Jeremiah on that.
That's what we do. We make sure that people always know that no matter what your career was, we reduce you to your Disney biography.
So that brings us to kind of the finale of the film, which takes place on a planet called Savareen, I think. And there's a great line here where Han and Lando are standing and watching or looking down at the wreckage of the Falcon. And Lando says to Han, "I hate you." And Han says, "I know," which of course is a reference to the "I love you, I know" from Empire Strikes Back. So I thought
How
that
come
was...
they don't have that on t-shirts?
Yeah, that would be good. And then, of course, we get the big Darth Maul thing. So, Kyle, why don't you talk about that, since you said you played that up in your review? What was your reaction to seeing Darth Maul in this movie?
Well, yeah, I mean, Jeremiah and I went to a press screening, and when that happened, you actually heard one of the critics in the audience yell, "What?" And then like afterwards you heard people kind of talking amongst each other about, oh well, you know, there's the Clone Wars show you have to watch, but no, I thought that was a big reveal, and I thought that it was going to be more talked about had the movie done better, I guess. I just thought that was kind of crazy and would get a lot of attention. Definitely got my attention because I never watched Clone Wars or anything, and took you a second, like, wait a minute, is this actually him? Is it like some other version that I'm unfamiliar with? So definitely worked for me.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point too, that it kind of requires the knowledge of the ancillary Star Wars media, because it generated a lot of, I wouldn't say hate, but definitely a lot of controversy online after the movie, that people were angry that they would have to like, oh, I need to have watched the cartoon to understand what's going on in the movies. But I like that kind of thing, so I'm with you on that. It didn't bother me, and I hadn't seen the Clone Wars yet. I knew Maul had come back on the Clone Wars, so maybe that's why it didn't bother me that much.
Yeah, I think with this one, they were definitely trying to go more of the MCU route of, hey, let's connect these stories so we can move forward to the bigger bad. Since Mike froze, I'll talk a little bit about Darth Maul. Oh, there he is. Nope,
I don't know what's going on. My internet has really been terrible today.
I think I actually wrote an article about, like, did Star Wars just pull an MCU move or something like that?
I think so, yeah. No, it worked out. One of the things that I've always loved about Star Wars, even when I was a kid in the first, Star Wars, not Episode 4, came out, was you could always tell that there was something more. And that's when the comics and the books and everything started coming out, which you didn't have to read back in the day to know everything, but it helped. Where now they're, okay, we need synergy. We need the comic books, the cartoons, the expanded universe, or not the expanded universe, but the books all to tie together. So fans like Mike can purchase everything possible.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of going back to what Mike was asking about earlier, if we'd ever get resolution on Kira's storyline, I think even if it's not in a TV show or a movie, that there's so many opportunities, because they're hopping all over the timeline. They always have to talk about how it relates to where on the Star Wars timeline it is. I don't know why someone eventually wouldn't go back and fill in that particular part in comics or books or whatever.
Well, and I struggled to just keep it all in my head, to be honest, because there's just so many different little storylines and characters, and especially that period prior to the rebellion really taking off. I have a very hard time with the various syndicates and trying to. I'll be honest, when I watch those first 3 films, I get frustrated because I don't feel like I can truly follow who's the villain and who's not, because I'm like, wait, I'm supposed to be excited for these people accomplishing. Oh wait, nope, they're actually the bad guys in this. I mean, and I understand it's because that's the reality of the dynamic, right? It's Palpatine playing 2 sides. Mm-hmm. But as a passive consumer of it, not a diehard, sometimes I feel like my enjoyment suffers a bit just because I'm not really sure who's the who they want me to sympathize with, who they want me to be cheering for. I mean, I know Han Solo is ultimately who I'm cheering for, but all these people that he's encountering along the way on this trip, I'm not exactly sure who I'm supposed to be excited that he is trusting and who I should be like, oh wait, don't do that, and maybe that's on purpose, but it's just one of those things where I never felt steady on my feet as I watched it.
That's a perfect example. Palpatine plays both sides, but when we get to the end of Solo, where Beckett and Biden are, Beckett turns on everybody. So it's one of those like, oh, okay. And then out of left field, here's another plot twist that ends the movie. And I'm sure Mike would have extra stuff to say, but he's been having some outages near his house. So that's why he just looks bored. I think he's frozen. There he goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mike, are you back?
So there was some kind of internet outage nearby. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Can you hear me?
Stuff happens.
Yeah,
we can hear you.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys touched on this while I was away, but the last thing that I really wanted to talk about in the last 5 minutes or whatever that we have is the elephant in the room, which is the performance of Alden Ehrenreich, and people were upset when he didn't look exactly like Harrison Ford when they cast him. I knew him.
And I think Mike's done. What did you guys think of that performance of him as Han Solo?
I'll let you go first, Kyle.
Oh, I thought he was great. Like, I know that there was a lot of concerns going into it. Like, that was part of the rumors is when they're talking about like a lot of the production issues, saying that he couldn't get through a scene without a coach or whatever, and that it was not coming together. And then you watch the movie, and I liked his performance a lot. I thought he did a lot of good mannerisms. Like, his voice sounded a lot like that character to me, at least.
Oh, I think we lost.
We lost Kyle. Oh, he's here.
There's Kyle. We just cut out Mike altogether.
Gotcha. No, I agree with you, Kyle. I agree with you totally regarding the mannerisms. Kind of, there's a moment in the film where he is talking to the resistance individuals we meet. Well, I'm sorry, the rebellion type individuals we meet, and he says, "Don't hold your breath, kid." And his delivery to me felt very much like it, almost like they had lifted it from previous films we'd see. It felt totally correct that's how Han Solo would say such a thing, and the way he had that kind of that charm, and I thought it worked for me. I didn't think, oh no, Han would never do that, and I thought it was very interesting the way that they use this film to kind of enter into that debate of did Han shoot first.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he was definitely a highlight of the film for me. I enjoyed his performance. Is he Harrison Ford 10 years before we saw him in Episode 4? No, but we also, we all need to get past the point of, oh, these actors are the character. No, the character is the people that write the character. And when it comes down to it, it's George Lucas and Kathleen Kennedy and their approval of these characters. So they could put any character in that we want. And on the flip side, people didn't like him as Han, but let's look at Lando in the same film and how much people praise that character.
Mm-hmm. Are you there, Mike, that you're able to share with us, or are you still having your internet? Yeah, Mike still.
Yeah.
I also like Donald Glover's performance, but I also thought that his was a little less even for me. Like, I felt that there's a couple scenes at the beginning where it doesn't quite match his performance later in the movie. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's just me, but
makes you wonder if those were from different direction. No.
Yeah, I was thinking.
I think Mike may be out for the rest of this. So does anybody else have anything they want to finish off with before we sign off?
I mean, for me, I think we've covered everything. We made our way to the end. The only thing that I would mention was the way I thought the score. They did a nice job with the score of offering us musical cues to connect us to the the classics, as it were. When when Han Solo is first seeing the Falcon, we hear music that is completely from what we're familiar with. And then it was also interesting how when the Marauders, when the on that sandy planet, the Marauders you have score that has vocals, which isn't a terribly common thing within Star Wars, like a Duel of the Fates, a choral element to it. So just moments like that, things like that. So to me, that elevated the nature of that moment, just because it connects it to Duel of the Fates. It connects it to other moments where we've had the choral. So maybe it's like, for me, that's like the film director going, pay attention to this, So okay, I'll pay attention.
Yeah. What about you, Kyle? Is there anything else you want to add to this?
I would say if you didn't get a chance to see the movie when it first came out, Disney Plus is a great chance to revisit it.
Yeah, it's really nice to have it on Disney Plus. So, if you've seen it, there are definitely parts where it's worth, maybe fast forwarding a little bit. The beginning for me always seems to be a fast forward point, but I enjoy the movie as a whole. I think that it fits well in the canon. It's not the best of the films, but I don't think that it falls in the worst of the films. I mean, that's a whole other topic for a different day. So I think that's going to wrap us up for today. Everybody, the next.
I'm here. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I can hear
Mike.
you.
Okay, go ahead. Wrap us up, Mike.
Hey, yeah, thanks for watching. Sorry I disappeared for the last 5 to 10 minutes. The next conversation is going to be X-Men Days of Future Past, which is next Thursday at 7:30 p.m. So tune in for that. We'll talk about some Marvel mutant action with Hugh Jackman. That's all I got for rhyming. But
is next Thursday like this Thursday or the Thursday after this?
It's this.
No, we're gonna have that debate.
This Thursday, I guess, at 7:30. So yeah, check that out right here on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. I think you guys said everything that I was going to say anyway. So good job. Thanks for hanging out and listening to us talk about Star Wars for a little while. We'll see you real soon. Bye, everybody.